on our watches. So this hearing will come to order. The committee meets today to consider the nominations of Vice Admiral Brad Cooper to be Commander, United States Central Command, and Lieutenant General Alexus G. Grynkewich to be Commander, United States European Command, and Supreme Allied Commander, Europe. I welcome our nominees and their families, and I thank them for their continued willingness to serve our nation. I want to begin my remarks by recognizing the remarkable skill, courage, and professionalism displayed by the men and women of our military and intelligence communities who participated in Operation Midnight Hammer over the weekend. President Trump was right to authorize the mission to strike Iran's nuclear facilities and address this long-standing threat to the United States. Our Commander-in-Chief gave Ayatollah Khamenei every chance to negotiate peacefully. The Iranian leader, however, rejected our presence in treaties. He instead chose to continue his pursuit of a nuclear weapon and support of terrorism rather than a peaceful resolution that would have benefited the Iranian people. To be clear, the situation the Iranian regime finds itself in today is entirely of its own making. I know members of this committee will have questions about Operation Midnight Hammer and the administration's Iran policy. I do remind my colleagues there will be a classified briefing for all senators later today with senior administration officials to address many of these questions. If confirmed, Admiral Cooper will assume command of CENTCOM in the midst of a seismic shift across the Middle East. These changes were precipitated by Hamas's barbaric attack against Israel on October 7, 2023. Since then, Iran's conventional military capabilities have been severely degraded. Hezbollah's leadership has been decimated, and Hamas has been crushed. Iran's longtime political ally in the region, Syria's Bashar Assad, is out of power and in exile. Iran and its terrorist allies are weaker than they have been in decades, but the job is not done. We must do all we can to support the defense of Israel and ensure that American forces in the region have what they need. I hope to hear Admiral Cooper's unclassified assessment of recent developments and his description of the force posture and force protection requirements CENTCOM needs in order to contend with Iran, its proxies, and other threats emanating from the region. Lastly, we must not lose sight of the continuing threat posed by radical Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Although weakened, ISIS and Al-Qaeda remain intent on killing Americans. I'm interested in Admiral Cooper's testimony about the current capabilities of terrorist groups in the region and what CENTCOM's counterterrorism strategy should be in order to counter this threat. Now, as to General Grynkewich, if confirmed, he will take command of EUCOM and NATO at a time of war and great uncertainty. Vladimir Putin continues to remind the West that Russia remains a determined enemy, one which is willing to use force to vindicate long-held grievances and to violate international law. The Russian dictator's invasion of Ukraine has rained death and destruction upon a democratic people and serves as a warning to the world that the military threat from Russia is as relevant today as it ever has been. Indeed, earlier this month, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte warned that, quote, Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years, unquote. He added that Putin's war economy produces more munitions in 3 months than the whole of NATO produces in a year. Of course, Russia is not just a danger to our NATO allies. Russia also directly threatens the homeland. Its nuclear arsenal is sized and postured to destroy the United States. The members of this committee are keen to hear General Grynkewich's views of the threat Russia poses, as well as his plans to counter it. The United States faces a daunting challenge. We must deter and, if necessary, defeat 2 nuclear peer adversaries. That task highlights the important role allies play in our security. President Trump deserves considerable credit for dramatically increasing allied burden sharing, which has helped to renew NATO's purpose. NATO is now actively debating a commitment for members to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. Amid this encouraging development, there are some in the Pentagon that believe the U.S. must draw down our military presence in Europe. This thinking bewilders most of us on this committee, given Russia's aggression and the renewed willingness of allies to share our collective defense burden. Our presence in Europe helps deter Russia. It also has additional benefits, including enabling and assisting our military operations in the CENTCOM and AFRICOM areas of operation. That support is vital, especially now as tensions once again rise in the Middle East. With that, I look forward to our hearing today, and I turn to my colleague and friend, Ranking Member Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Admiral Cooper, General Grynkewich. Congratulations on your nominations, and thank you for stepping forward to continue your long careers of service. And I particularly extend my appreciation to your families who were with you every step of the way and are one of the reasons I think you're here today before us. Gentlemen, as you are well aware, this is a very dangerous moment. On Saturday, the President ordered airstrikes on several nuclear facilities deep within Iran. More than 100 American aircraft and thousands of service members executed a remarkable global operation that significantly damaged Iran's nuclear infrastructure, although we still await the final battle damage assessment. And I salute the military personnel who carried out this mission with incredible skill and bravery. It is imperative that we prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. However, I am concerned about the consequences of this attack. Iran has already retaliated by launching ballistic missiles at our bases in Qatar and Iraq, threatening tens of thousands of American troops. Fortunately, these strikes were intercepted, but we must recognize the grave risk of igniting a broader regional war. And our forces in the region must continue to brace for additional attacks. And indeed, we've seen additional attacks between Israel and Iran. I urge the Trump administration to pursue diplomacy and international engagement to prevent further violence. Admiral Cooper, I trust that you understand the challenging situation within which you have been nominated to lead CENTCOM. In this regard, your distinguished record of service is encouraging. Your career as a surface warfare officer with extensive command experience in the Middle East, including your current position as Deputy CENTCOM Commander and previous command of U.S. Fifth Fleet, should serve you well. If confirmed as CENTCOM Commander, you will need to not only address the Iran crisis, but also continue to navigate the difficult environment surrounding Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, the ever-present Houthi threat in Yemen, and the potential resurgence of ISIS in Syria and Iraq, all while the administration has announced significant force reduction in these areas. I'd like to know how you would address each of these threats and how U.S. military operations can align with Iranian nuclear negotiations, and any plans you have to help build the capacity of our regional partners, such as the Lebanese armed forces. Even as we navigate these conflicts in the Middle East, the security environment in Europe remains fraught. At this moment, NATO leaders are gathering in Brussels to address a number of urgent issues, including the war in Ukraine and Russia's increasingly aggressive posture towards the West. And I'm hopeful President Trump will take this opportunity to clearly express America's solidarity with our NATO allies. General Grynkewich, you have been nominated to command European Command, or EUCOM. For the past 3 years, EUCOM has served as the backbone of the international effort to support Ukraine, enabling the Ukrainians to succeed on the battlefield while sending an unmistakable message to America's adversaries around the globe. However, in recent months, the position in the United States seems to have reversed, with the Trump administration challenging our allies while attempting to negotiate directly with Vladimir Putin. I would point out that Putin has suffered immense cost in Ukraine and has turned to Iran and North Korea to help sustain his war. In contrast, the Ukrainian military continues to fight bravely and demonstrate stunning battlefield innovations, such as its recent drone attacks deep within Russian territory. I would argue that there is never a time to appease Putin, but it certainly is not now. I'm also concerned by the administration's plan to slash funding and reduce U.S. force presence in EUCOM and their failure to request new funding for assistance to Ukraine. These decisions send an encouraging message to Russia. Indeed, I think it's imperative that we provide a significant supplemental emergency appropriations to Ukraine to continue the fight and send a very strong signal to Putin that we're not giving up. General Grynkewich, I would appreciate your assessment of the war in Ukraine and your views on future U.S. military activities and investments needed in the EUCOM area of responsibility to uphold our steadfast commitment to collective defense and American security. Gentlemen, if confirmed, you will lead America's forward deployed forces at a momentous time. I'm grateful for your willingness to step forward and meet this challenge. Thank you, and I look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Reed. Now we will take opening statements, no longer than 5 minutes, if you don't mind, gentlemen. We'll begin with you, Admiral Cooper. Your opening statement, sir.
Well, good morning, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished members of this committee. As the proud son of a career Army officer and Vietnam veteran and the grandson of a World War II veteran in the Pacific, I'm honored and I'm humbled by the opportunity to appear before you today. I would first like to thank the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for their faith, trust, and confidence in nominating me to serve as the next commander of U.S. Central Command. I'm also honored to join today with Lieutenant General Alexus Grynkewich. We all know him by his call sign of Grinch. Having served alongside of him for the last 4 years in very challenging times, he is the very best our nation has to offer. It's a wonderful privilege to be a beam of him today. I'm joined today by my wife, Susan, my high school sweetheart from Montgomery, Alabama, and the anchor of our family. She was there when my parents signed a waiver so that I could attend the Naval Academy at the age of 17. As I prepare to mark 4 decades wearing the cloth of the nation next week, I know that none of it would have been possible without Susan's boundless love, not only for our family, but to thousands of military spouses around the world. She truly has been my greatest source of strength throughout this amazing journey. Also with us today are our daughter Katie, a cardiovascular ICU nurse in Jacksonville, Florida, and Andrew, a fellow nurse and Marine veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Our son Bradford, a professional welder, is working on a U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer today in Mayport, Florida, playing his role in keeping our Navy fit to fight. He and his wife Shelby are unable to be here today as they prepare for the imminent arrival of grandchild number 3, a future member of the U.S. Naval Academy class of 2047. Sorry, Senator Reed. Our grandchildren Avery and Charlie also couldn't be here today, but they remain 2 of our life's absolute greatest joys. I'm also grateful for the support of my brothers and sisters-in-law who are here today. As a career Navy surface warfare officer, I have spent my adult life on Navy ships deploying all around the world, including a tour on the ground in Afghanistan, and with family moves to Germany, Korea, Japan, and most recently Bahrain. Supporting the Coopers has truly been a team sport, and I'm deeply thankful for their love these many years. My greatest inspiration for continued service has come from those I've had the privilege to lead and serve alongside in the Joint Force. U.S. forces in the Middle East are laser-focused today on warfighting, lethality, and their readiness, and they are performing superbly. I honor them and their families for the sacrifices they continue to make for the nation. I would like to specifically acknowledge the exquisite execution by the Joint Force of an incredibly complex mission in Iran this past weekend and successful defense of Al Udeid Air Base just yesterday. I just could not be prouder, and I know that this committee shares in that same pride. Over the past 4 years, I've had the privilege of living in and leading in the Central Command area of responsibility. That time has given me a front row seat to both the volatility and the promise of the Middle East. It's also reinforced a clear-eyed understanding. The Middle East is incredibly dynamic today. There are challenges for sure, but also real strategic opportunities. If confirmed, I will work with this committee to shape outcomes that advance our national interests. I would like to acknowledge and thank the current commander of U.S. Central Command, General Eric Kurilla, his wife and family for their lifetime of service to our country. Our nation and our troops in the Middle East have been blessed to have General Kurilla at the helm of Central Command for the last 39 months. Finally, I would like to thank this committee for your steadfast support and commitment to the oversight that makes our force stronger. If confirmed, I pledge to maintain a transparent and fully responsive relationship with this committee. I look forward to your questions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Cooper, and thank you for your kind words about General Kurilla. I think they're shared by most of us here behind the dais. Before I recognize you, Lieutenant General Grynkewich, would you get together with Admiral Cooper and see if you can get that grandson of his in the Air Force Academy at the appropriate time?
Sir, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
We all make mistakes.
You are now recognized.
Clearly, they're not qualified for West Point, but that's okay.
Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I would also like to thank President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, and General Kane for their trust and confidence in me and for the opportunity, if confirmed, to continue serving and leading those who raised their right hand and swore an oath of service to our nation. Today, I'm honored to testify alongside Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, the nominee for United States Central Command. Brad and I fought alongside each other in our previous jobs as the maritime and air component commanders in U.S. CENTCOM, and having seen Brad in action, I know of no other leader more focused on leadership, warfighting, and excellence. Up front, I would like to thank my family for their support and sacrifice throughout my career. A former Air Force Chief of Staff used to remind us that our families are the best possible deal the military could ever get. Our spouses toil to take care of the troops and families we lead, and our children learn to make friends and grow roots quickly as we move from assignment to assignment. My wife Shannon is here with me today. We've been married for 27 years, and over that time, she's been a tireless supporter not just of me, but of all military families. Our son Justin, a rising junior, currently overseas for a summer program, endured, or he would say experienced, 10 moves by the time he was 17. He attended 3 high schools. I asked him if he wanted to stay in place with his mom for his senior year of school when I received an assignment as he completed the 11th grade. With a year-long deployment for me during his freshman year still fresh on his mind, he said, "No way. I don't want to be the reason the family's apart." We're super proud of Justin and can't wait to see him this summer. Representing the much broader swath of family and friends who've supported us over the years, we're also joined today by Shannon's sister, Sarah, whose kids, despite my previous nomination and confirmation by this body, still insist on referring to me as Uncle Two-Star. I was inspired to serve by 2 men, my grandfather who served in World War II and Korea, and my Uncle Nick, who flew F-4s in the Air Force during Vietnam and who's watching today. My mother, who is also watching these proceedings from down in Georgia, recognized the influence these men had on me and my desire to serve. As a single mom, she worked 2 to 3 jobs in order to have enough money to send me to Georgia Military College Prep School. There I was mentored by Lieutenant Colonel Kurt Landers, a retired Army helicopter pilot, who told me that flying was great, but if I wanted to do it, I ought to consider the Air Force, and the rest is history. Since I first marched up the ramp at the U.S. Air Force Academy on day 1 of basic cadet training in June of 1989, countless others have shaped and molded me as an airman, a fighter pilot, and as a leader. No one gets to this point in a military career without a legion of friends, mentors, and supporters. And for all of those who've helped make me who I am today, I'm filled with gratitude. In my current role on the Joint Staff, I'd had the privilege of seeing the broad swath of global challenges facing America today. Our adversaries are converging, and the risks of conflict with one or more of them grows each and every day. Accordingly, it is more essential than ever for us to focus on warfighting readiness and lethality at all echelons. If confirmed, I look forward to working with this committee and the Congress on these and other issues of critical importance to U.S. forces in Europe and to the alliance. And while the Indo-Pacific has risen in importance over the previous 2 decades, European and American security remain as intertwined as our history, our cultures, and our economies. As such, a strong NATO capable of defending Europe remains essential to American interests, and if confirmed, it will be the honor of my lifetime to lead not only U.S. forces in the European region, but the men and women from across the alliance within Allied Command operations. Finally, I'd like to offer a brief word of thanks to the current commander of U.S. EUCOM and SACEUR, General Chris Cavoli, and his wife, Christina. They have led our forces and those of the Alliance during a highly consequential time, and I know the nation joins Shannon and I in wishing them all the best as they head into their next chapter after an incredible 38 years of service to the Army, the Joint Force, and the Alliance. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General, and thank you both, gentlemen. In order to exercise its legislative and oversight responsibilities, it is important that this committee and other appropriate committees of the Congress be able to receive testimony, briefings, and other communications and information. So I ask standard questions that we ask of every nominee, and you can just simply say yes or no aloud together, simultaneously. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree when asked to give your personal views, even if those views differ from the administration in power?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
Will you ensure your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record in hearings?
Yes.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes.
Yes.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
Yes.
Do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communication, in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
Yes.
Yes.
That concludes the standard questions, and now we'll begin a round of questions. Each senator will be allotted 5 minutes. Let me ask a question that I've asked to all the nominees this year, and also to the Secretary of Defense just recently at his latest hearing before this committee. And that regards reconciliation, the $150 billion that we anticipate will be put in the reconciliation bill for defense. Much of the funding in the defense reconciliation bill is unspecific and will technically be at the discretion of the Department of Defense, though we will write specific recommendations for them. A quick yes or no from each of you. Admiral Cooper, first, do you commit to follow the Congress's spending recommendations in defense reconciliation unequivocally?
Yes.
And Lieutenant General Grynkewich.
I do, sir.
Thank you very much. Now let's move on then to CENTCOM. And so, Admiral Cooper, you've spent a number of years serving senior military positions in the Middle East. It's fair to say you understand the Iranian threat better than most. How would you characterize Iran's ability to threaten the United States, Israel, and our partners in the region today after what has happened during the last weekend? How does the threat compare to just a few years ago before Hamas attacked Israel in October of 2023? And so you'll be talking about the Iranian threat as well as their terrorist proxies.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. I think we would all agree that Iran is the #1 source of instability in the region, the #1 source of and sponsor of terror throughout the world. At the strategic level, I think they've been weakened since the events of 7 October. At the tactical level, I think they've been degraded. And I think the degree to which that degradation has taken place, particularly in the last 12 days, is best discussed in a classified form. I think we'll be able to more ably articulate the specifics of what that looks like as a result of the last 12 days in conflict with Israel.
Okay, and I do understand that, and I mentioned that in my opening statement. But would you agree with me that the remarkable effectiveness of Israel's military campaign against Iran and against its terrorist proxies has directly affected, in a positive way, American national security?
I would, sir.
How so?
So I think if you zoom out and take a look at where the threats have been, and you look at decades of Iranian sponsorship of terrorism, you see the blood that's on the hands of the Iranians from Hezbollah to Iranian-backed militia with hundreds of attacks against American service members. They have and they continue to be threats to United States forces in the region.
These terrorist groups could not possibly have engaged in their reign of terror without the assistance and backing of the Iranian regime, could they?
They could not.
Thank you very much. Now, let me say, Lieutenant General Grynkewich, but as I ask my question, let me agree with our distinguished ranking member that there's no time to try to appease Putin, but if ever there were, it surely would not be now. And that this is no time, in my judgment, for us to let up in support of those who would resist his illegal invasion of neighbors. General Grynkewich, General Cavoli has testified that ground combat forces are essential in deterring Russian aggression in Europe. Can you describe the value of maintaining a strong force posture in Europe? And specifically, EUCOM has 5 brigade combat teams addressed to it, 3 of which are rotational. What impact would a return of these rotational brigades to the United States, continental United States, have on our defense and deterrence goals in Europe, sir?
Chairman, I do agree that land combat power is very critical in the European theater. It is a large land mass, and the plains of Europe have long required that ground combat power to be present. I also think in the broader context of European force posture, if we look at the situation today, many of our forces that were forward postured in Europe were in a perfect position to swing into action to support General Kurilla during the crisis in the Middle East. So it is a good pivot point from which you can move forces to any region of the world for combat operations. With respect to any potential reduction in force posture, I don't want to get ahead of any posture reviews that the department is undertaking right now, but I do commit to providing a detailed assessment and my military advice up to the Secretary of Defense as they go through that posture review and understanding the importance that ground combat power has.
Fair enough. We're going to stick to the 5 minutes, so I will yield back and recognize my friend Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, let me begin by saluting General Kurilla and General Cavoli, outstanding soldiers who've left a distinguished legacy. Admiral Cooper, we have something sort of in common. My father served in the United States Navy in World War II and inspired me to go to West Point, and your father served in the United States Army in World War II and inspired you to go to the Navy. So we have something in common.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. One of the critical issues at the moment is the possibility of Iranian and Russian collaboration, which touches both CENTCOM and EUCOM. The foreign minister was just in Moscow, I believe, yesterday. The Iranians have provided significant support to their fight against Ukraine, and I'm sure at this point they're demanding reciprocal support. Both General Grynkewich and Admiral Cooper, from a military perspective, what happens if the Iranians and the Russians begin to collaborate more closely in supplying the Iranians with equipment or with technicians or with a whole range of things? Admiral Cooper, please.
Senator, thank you for that. First, I think I'd note the Iranian and Russian collaboration. I'd also add into that mix the collaboration with North Korea and China. I think at the strategic level, that emerging axis is troubling and one that we'll have to keep our eye on, and if confirmed, I will absolutely do that. We've certainly seen the tactical implications of support from Iran to Russia. We've seen tactical implications of Chinese companies providing sensors and weapons and components to Iran, who ship them to the Houthis, who shoot them at Americans. I think we need to call those types of things out more, but clearly that emerging foursome, that axis is one that we need to pay attention to.
Thank you. And General Grynkewich.
Yeah, sir, I agree with my good friend Admiral Cooper on this. From a European perspective, the Iranian supplying of drones to the Russians and their extensive use in Ukraine has contributed to countless numbers of casualties. And so that is one thing that I do agree we need to keep a close eye on. But no doubt in my mind, we've seen the use of North Korean troops in the Russian fight in Ukraine. And of course, China is providing economic support to the entire group of these, this adversary alignment that we start to see. In a future context, as we start to think about potential conflicts against great powers, we do need to worry about the potential for simultaneity of those conflicts and think about how we posture ourselves and our allies to help deal with that. And that's one reason I think the increased spending that we're seeing from our NATO partners is going to be absolutely essential to success of the alliance moving forward.
I think your experience, Admiral Cooper, in the Middle East is that it's not a linear process there. Things happen which are quite unexpected. And one aspect of this, and it was pointed out by Vali Nasser, who's one of the more perceptive commentators about the area, is that Iran might draw the lesson that their only deterrence is to have a nuclear weapon, and it could accelerate its process of trying to obtain a weapon. What's your assessment of the possibility of that?
Senator, I think as we sit here now, and it's a very dynamic time, I'd be reluctant to make a strategic assessment or tactical assessment. I think that's best done by the intelligence community in the coming days. But for sure, the thing I think that we need to do right now, and we are doing with clarity, is making sure our men and women are safe in the Middle East. And that's where our focus is today, sir.
Oh, thank you. A final question for Admiral Cooper. The proxy network of the Iranians has been significantly degraded by Israeli attacks primarily, but also other factors, the change in leadership in Syria. How are we going to continue that denigration of the proxies? That's one aspect of it. Second, do you sense, and this might be reserved for the closed session, that those proxies will eventually come back to the Iranians and start being active?
Senator, first I would agree that proxies are significantly degraded, particularly Hamas and Hezbollah. If confirmed, it would be a priority of mine to deter conflict through both the deterrence of Iran and those proxies. I think we're going to have to continue to watch them very closely. While those two proxies have been degraded, we still have the Iranian-aligned militia groups that are out there, as well as the Houthis currently in a ceasefire with us.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you both Admiral Cooper, General Grynkewich, for your service and for the service of your family to this country for many, many years. General, you're nominated not only to serve as commander of the U.S. European Command, but also as the Supreme Allied Commander, Europe, who is responsible for all NATO military operations and forces. And that includes the American nuclear forces that are assigned to NATO. NATO is a nuclear alliance. The role that you would assume in NATO has always been filled by an American, beginning with General Eisenhower in 1950. How do you view the role of nuclear deterrence with respect to the NATO alliance?
Senator, in my view, the U.S. strategic nuclear forces under the command of General Cotton at U.S. Strategic Command are really foundational to the security of all of Europe and foundational to the security of the alliance, as really, and also underpin global security in many, many ways. And they're absolutely essential. I also would note the forward positioning of certain nuclear capabilities on the continent, and those provide a very important backstop against any potential threat coming from the east.
You earlier were asked about the increased, the higher role of spending from our NATO partners to 5% of GDP. I'm curious how you would work to coordinate among the NATO members to ensure that their investments would be complementary to each other and to the alliance as a whole.
Senator, if confirmed, I think that would be one of my major responsibilities, is to ensure that any increased spending was done in a way that benefited the alliance and ensured the achievement of capability targets that the alliance has agreed to. I'd also note the work that has been done on the NATO plans and that there are specific requirements and capabilities that are essential to the effective execution of those plans. And so, certain countries have strengths in particular areas. Some countries are very strong in the land domain. Others have a stronger position in the maritime domain. And within all of the domains, there's, of course, a variety of capabilities. My goal would be to work very hard with our allies and partners in the region to bring all of that together in a coherent fashion to increase the strength of the alliance.
Do you know if discussions are going on right now with that?
Ma'am, I'm certain that those have started, absolutely.
Thank you. Admiral Cooper, yesterday we had the opportunity to visit a little bit in a classified session together, and we talked about Iran's influence in both Syria and Lebanon and how that's been changed with recent events. And it sounds like there are real opportunities in the future for more stability, for peace within those nations. What do you assess a post-Assad Syria and a post-Hezbollah Lebanon would mean for the region in its entirety?
Senator, first, I enjoyed our conversation yesterday. When I think first of Syria, I think that stability in Syria can translate into security in the United States. And here's how those dots connect. ISIS thrives in chaos. If the government of Syria, now 7 months into their existence, can help suppress that ISIS threat, along with the U.S. forces in the region, that stability helps create our own security. I'm optimistic for the future, although they're at the beginnings of this new government. I think we've now seen several steps, including Ambassador Tom Barrack, who's the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, being appointed as a Syria envoy. He's made several trips. Everything we do in Syria will be diplomatically led. And I think we're heading in a good direction in that regard.
If you are confirmed, how would you ensure that CENTCOM integrates its actions both with state and treasury to support more stability, growing stability within Syria?
Senator, I would anticipate we will be nested very closely, diplomatically led, drafting in behind. As the policies start to sharpen on this, we will be prepared to provide our best military advice in how to support those policies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Fisher. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to both of you and your families. Thank you very much for your service. To ensure the fitness of nominees for the positions to which they have been nominated, I ask the following two foundational questions of all nominees before any of the committees on which I sit. So I will ask these questions of you. We'll start with Admiral Cooper and then go on to General Grynkewich. So since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
I have not.
I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
No.
The Middle East remains a volatile, unstable region, and the situation risks drawing the U.S. and our allies into a protracted war, risking the lives of American service members without a clear plan for what comes next. And Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, which is why I and others supported the 2015 JCPOA, which allowed the IAEC to inspect suspected Iranian nuclear facilities. Only Congress can declare a war, and the vast majority of Americans oppose another endless conflict in the Middle East. And even after a hastily announced ceasefire, the situation remains highly tenuous, while ongoing attacks, conflicting claims, and a rapidly evolving regional crisis continues. So this regime must use all, and I am talking about the Trump regime, must use all diplomatic tools at its disposal to avoid further escalation and instability in the region. Admiral Cooper, I am concerned about additional escalation following the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. And despite the president's, as I mentioned, ceasefire announcements, the situation clearly remains volatile with renewed attacks and conflicting claims. What steps is CENTCOM taking or should take to deter further Iranian retaliation, especially as tensions remain high?
Senator, first, I would agree the Middle East is a very dynamic region today, and dangers do exist. From a military perspective, our number one priority is the safety of our men and women in uniform, the force protection. We are laser focused on that today, and if confirmed, it would remain my number one priority, taking care of our men and women in uniform.
Well, we have some 40,000 troops that are in the area, and so force protection of those troops will be really critical. But do you have any ideas about what Central Command can do to ensure that that region becomes more stable?
I think for
example, would you really support diplomatic efforts?
Senator, absolutely.
As a first step.
Absolutely. Step one is diplomatically led, as we saw over a multi-month period. And in support of that, a number of options, as required by law, were provided to support that diplomatically led effort. And if confirmed, I would provide those same set of options.
Does Central Command have a role in fostering these diplomatic engagements, discussions?
Central Command certainly has a role in the mill-to-mill underpinning that support the diplomatic engagements. We've had that for decades. It's particularly strong now, and if confirmed, I would look to nurture those relationships.
So how would Central Command balance the need to continue protecting our allies, i.e. Israel, with the emerging threat to U.S. forces of some 40,000 troops in the region following this weekend's strike of Iran's nuclear facilities?
Senator, this is something we've been focused on for many years, particularly illuminating since the October 7th attacks in 2023, and it's a priority effort every single day, and I would anticipate that would continue, and if confirmed, it would certainly be a priority of mine.
Well, we have a situation in which the head of our intelligence forces, well, basically intelligence agency, says that Iran was not pursuing its nuclear ambitions. Meanwhile, you have a president who says, I don't believe her. This does not give us much reassurance of what is actually happening in the region. So Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know I'm beyond my time, but the volatility remains. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Hirono. Senator Cotton.
Gentlemen, congratulations on your nominations. Thank you to your families for their sacrifices over the year, and most important, thank you to the men and women you represent in your organizations and will represent for their service as well. I want to commend you both and commend everyone who was involved in the exceptionally successful mission against Iran over the weekend. Admiral Cooper, I want to return to a brief point you made with Senator Wicker. Although we have dealt a massive setback to Iran's nuclear threat, which is the worst kind of threat they could pose to us, Iran still poses a severe threat to our troops and to Americans around the world, right?
They do. They possess considerable tactical capability, one element of which we saw yesterday, which we thwarted in defense of Al Udeid Air Base.
And as the next commander of Central Command, one of your top priorities will be to continue the aggressive defensive posture and to continue the deterrence that's now been reestablished against Iran to defend our troops in the region as well as all of our friends in the region, Israel and the Arab nations.
Absolutely, sir. It would be an important priority, deterring Iran in proxy.
And I know that President Trump is mindful about this, that just because they had a very weak response yesterday, which they telegraphed in advance, doesn't mean that there might not be another response in a day or a week or a month or a year or 3 years. And it could be missiles or rockets against our troops, or it could be trying to blow up an embassy around the world or targeting American citizens for terrorist attacks, something that we have to be constantly on guard against because Iran has been terrorizing America and the civilized world for 46 years. Is that right?
Completely agree, sir. We've got to be in a three-point stance, ready to go every single day.
And at bottom, Iran didn't become a terrorist state because the United States bombed their nuclear bunkers. The United States bombed their nuclear bunkers because they're a terrorist state. Is that right?
I would agree.
Thank you. The strikes over the weekend showed the importance of having the world's very best industrial base and best munitions. The first time those had been employed in combat operations, they were incredibly successful. But the wars, both in the Middle East since October 7th and in Ukraine, has also revealed the fragility of munitions production in this country and the defense industry. Would you agree that we need to do a lot more to increase capacity for our munitions industrial base?
I would, sir. It's an area of significant concern. I know this is an area that senior DoD leadership is focused on right now. It's not a new issue. It's been around for some time, but clearly it's one we need to focus on right now.
And General Grynkewich, I assume both in your current role in the Joint Staff and also your anticipated role in Europe, you would agree as well that we need to significantly expand munitions production in this country?
Senator, I would, as the Director for Operations on the Joint Staff with a responsibility along with my colleagues in logistics and sustainment for managing those munitions and pushing them to the fight. I'm acutely aware of some of the limitations that we have, and if confirmed, I would continue to advocate for strong investment on both sides of the Atlantic in the industrial base.
And our industrial base includes our defense contractors, companies that make this in the private sector, but it also includes our organic industrial base within the department. And given the track record over the last 3 years, would you agree that we really need an all-of-the-above strategy? We need to push both the private sector and lean on the assets we already have in the Department of Defense to produce the munitions our warfighters need?
Senator, I would. The organic industrial base does need that investment and attention. And on the private sector side, I would say we need to focus not just on traditional prime contractors, but also expand the competitive space to new entrants to get as much production capacity as possible.
Thank you. Admiral Cooper, I think I saw you vigorously nodding your head in agreement. Would you like to state that for the record?
Absolutely. I think the characterization of an all-of-the-above strategy is the appropriate characterization.
Okay. The operation last weekend, I guess a couple Thursdays ago in Iran, with the use of drones launched from inside the country, as well as a few weeks ago by Ukraine inside Russia, has revealed once again the threat that drones can pose to our bases here in the United States. And I've worked with Senator Gillibrand and a lot of other senators to address that threat here in the U.S., and we're going to try to pass legislation to expand the department's authorities on it. But General Grynkewich, it's also a real threat in Europe, the prospect of NATO or American positions being attacked by drones, as we saw in Iran or as we saw in Ukraine. How do you assess the drone threat right now in the European theater?
Yeah, Senator, I think it's an acute threat. It's a new technology, and our investment in both counter-UAS capability and the ability to do the same sort of activities with our own drones needs vigorous attention.
Thank you. I agree it's an acute threat. If Israel can do it to Iran, if Ukraine can do it to Russia, we need to assume that the bad guys could do it to us and our troops and our bases as well, whether overseas or even here at home, and we need to counteract it rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Langford and I, 3 weeks ago, were in your AOR, Admiral, and in Baghdad and Erbil, Beirut, Amman, and Turkey, and Istanbul. And first, I want to say what wonderful people we have working for us. All the people we met, our military people, particularly in Lebanon, State Department, intelligence community. This country is very fortunate to have the quality people that we have in dangerous and difficult circumstances. You're nodding. I presume you agree with that observation.
Sir, we have extraordinary men and women serving overseas today and throughout the world.
One of the things we learned in all of those countries was that none of those countries want us to leave. There are uncertainties and instabilities. For example, in Iraq, probably the last proxy standing right now of Iran are the Iran-inspired militias in Iraq. They have an election coming up this fall, and that's been one of the significant dangers. What I'm getting at is, it seems to me, given the renewed volatility, this region has been volatile, seems like forever, but the renewed volatility in the last several months is not a good time to be drawing down our forces because they are viewed as stabilizing forces in all of those countries in the Middle East. Do you have thoughts about that?
Senator, I think it's first and foremost important to remember what our forces are doing in Iraq and Syria, and that's focusing on the counter threat, the defeat ISIS operation with 20 other countries.
And that was going to be my next question. That's, in addition to the Iran militias, ISIS, there's a deep concern about ISIS reconstituting in Syria given the changes there. So the point is, it's not, I believe, it's not a time to be retrenching given the developments of just the last several months.
So I completely agree. I think stability is a critical aspect of security in the region, and particularly those countries. Our approach today is to assess and move forward on a conditions-based assessment. I think given the dynamic nature of what's happening today, that assessment in the future could look different than it does today, perhaps. And if confirmed, I'm committed into my tenure to continue to assess on what our posture needs to look like and make recommendations accordingly.
Well, the other topic that we haven't discussed today is Syria, and Syria is in a very I almost said precarious, but it's in an important place. Everyone we talked to said Shura is what we've got, and that there's really no plan B. And Ambassador Barak has done a good job, I think, of being the envoy. But it seems to me that Syria is a place that we need to watch, because if he goes away, then all of a sudden it's open season for ISIS and other potential terrorist groups.
Senator, I completely agree. I think the stability in Syria hinges upon the current leader remaining in place, and that's important for U.S. Homeland Defense and Homeland Defense forward. As you described, Ambassador Barak is leading this effort diplomatically. The U.S. military has had a nascent role, but certainly our role would be to provide best military advice on what that could look like going forward. For sure, right now, our troops in Syria remain focused on the counter-ISIS mission. It is also the perspective of the new Syrian government to counter ISIS. So we'll see what that looks like in the future, but I think it's an encouraging sign.
General Grynkewich, the issue of Russian activity along the border of the Baltic states. My understanding is that there is some probing and buildup of Russian troops along that border. Is that something that we should be watching carefully?
Senator, I think we should, and particularly as the Russian war economy continues, if and when we're able to achieve the objective of a ceasefire in Ukraine, Russia will have a lot more troops that they can put in that region, which will be a force in being that from a military perspective we'll have to pay a lot of attention to.
A friend in Maine and I were discussing this, and he said Russia isn't interested in any other parts of the country. It's just parts of the world. It's just Ukraine. My response was, why did Finland join NATO after 75 years? They know what Russia can and probably would do. Is it important for us strategically to continue the support of the Ukrainians in the kind of way that we have done in the past to maintain our military intelligence support?
Senator, I think the Ukrainians have done an incredible job defending. They are forcing the Russians to make only incremental advances at a tremendous cost, and I think we should continue the effort to support them that has allowed them to perform so well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator King, you and Senator Cotton have both made very strong bipartisan points, and I appreciate that line of questioning in particular. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, to both of you and to your families, thank you all for your service to our country. You both come as very qualified individuals to the new jobs in which you will step into very shortly. I want to take a little bit of time, though, and talk about what I think is one of the most important aspects of this new position that each of you will be in very shortly, and that is the difference between when we ask someone who doesn't wear the uniform of the United States of America, but rather a suit and tie, and when they come before this committee. Some from outside of government who will give us their opinion about issues and policies and positions. But then we have the individuals who come from an administration, and I've been here 10 years now, and I've seen 4 different administrations in which individuals come and they give us their opinion on what happens or a position with regard to policy. We take their statements with a grain of salt, recognizing that they represent an administration's point of view. But when we come to you as members of the armed services from the different branches, and we ask for your professional military opinion, it is perhaps one of the most important things that you can do to provide us directly and without color the black and white of exactly what you think, because that's what we rely on in terms of truth. And I want to go into this a little bit because, just as an example, most recently a number of us have asked specific questions with regard to the spectrum and about the importance of the spectrum and managing it on behalf of the defense of our country by the Department of Defense. And on over 28 different occasions, we have asked specifically members of the United States Armed Services who were wearing the uniform their professional military opinion. And in some cases, I suspect that their honest and straightforward answers have probably gotten them into a little bit of hot water with individuals who simply wear a suit and tie in an administration. But nonetheless, they have adhered to the principle that they're required to give us a straightforward answer. It is the most important thing that you can do in coming before this committee. I lay that out for you because this is what makes the difference between a young man's ability to defend himself on the battlefield. And I'm going to start, General Grynkewich, you've served and you've flown a fourth-generation aircraft. You've flown a fifth-generation aircraft. Things are going to change very rapidly on the battlefield for young men and women. Today on the battlefield, would you say that if the enemy can see you, a young man or a woman, regardless of whether he's in a tank or whether he's in an aircraft or in a command center, if they can see you, they can kill you? Is that a fair statement?
Senator, I think it is in most cases. There are a few times when they can see us and try to take a swipe at us, and we have ways to evade or defeat that. But it is the transparency on the modern battlefield is apparent, I think, based on what we've seen, both in Brad's current AOR as the deputy commander and in the Russia-Ukraine fight.
Thank you. And Admiral Cooper, same question to you. If they can see you, can they kill you, or at least they're going to do their best to try and kill you?
Senator, absolutely. Retaining our advantage, whether that's a stealth advantage or advantage of maneuver or our overmatch, which we have at times in the spectrum, is critical. I'd also add, with respect to the spectrum, I spent my entire adult life at sea on guided missile destroyers and guided missile cruisers. They are national assets. They would be rendered highly ineffective without the type of spectrum management that you've been advocating for.
Thank you. And this is the reason why I think it is absolutely critical. And there's going to be lots of questions up here about munitions and everything else. But if I could simply, once again, strongly recommend that when the question from any member of this committee, Republican or Democrat, is given to you, and they ask for your professional military opinion, it's because we're trying to find out exactly what's going on. And even if it's uncomfortable, this is where the rubber really meets the road, is when you provide that information to us, we make better decisions. And that's, I think, what this place is all about, is the oversight does not work if we can't count on you for that straightforward, hard-hitting response to our questions. And with that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Amen, Senator Rounds. Thank you for that question. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations to the nominees. I'm particularly glad, Admiral Cooper, your role as the lead of the liaison office here in Congress will give you just innate sensitivity to the relationship that the Article I and Article II branches must have on these important issues. So congratulations to both of you. I'll put it on the table. I'm very disturbed with the U.S. getting into an offensive war with Iran. And I'm praying, and I know we all are, that the ceasefire is going to hold. That would be great news for the region, great news for us. I think there are differences of opinion in this body, as there would be in the American public, about the virtues of offensive war between the United States and Iran. And I understand those differences, but I hope my colleagues will agree that something of this magnitude should not be the decision of one person. The framers of the Constitution decided very carefully that the initiation of offensive war is something that should happen after a vote of Congress. And in this instance, there was not only no congressional authorization, there was no congressional consultation, and there wasn't even congressional notification. I've taken the position since I came here under President Obama's second term, President Trump's first term, President Biden's term, President Trump's second term, that I don't want to have the decision about whether we send our sons and daughters to war rest on one person. However much I agree with that person, I don't think it should rest on the shoulders or rest on the say-so or the whims or the daily mood, vibe, or attitude of one person. And particularly when, in this instance, the Israeli foreign minister had said the nuclear program of Iran had been knocked back at least 2 or 3 years, when our own intelligence says they weren't moving to a nuclear weapon. The need to strike without even notifying Congress I find deeply discouraging. There's some things President Trump has done diplomatically recently I'm very much support, and I hope I might get to those in a minute. But I just hope my colleagues will stand for the proposition, whatever you think about the virtues of a war with Iran, that Congress should be weighing in on this, yes or no. Congress should be consulted. We are the people's elected representatives, and we look our constituents in the eye who've got kids or spouses in the military, and we ought to be having a debate and having a vote and not just allowing this to be done on autopilot by a single person, whether or not we share the party affiliation or whether we agree with that person. Senator Cotton said something that is very true and that picks up, Admiral Cooper, on something you said. You said that Iran was the chief sponsor of terrorism in the region, and they are, and the chief source of instability in the region, and they are. And Senator Cotton said they have posed risk to Americans for the last 46 years, and they have. Everything that he said was true, and everything that you said was true. But, you know, in law, we used to say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Sometimes we omit the whole truth. Because, and I think if we're going to grapple with, hopefully, diplomatic resolutions to these issues, we got to be completely truthful. Everything that you said about Iran was accurate. But what nobody seems ever to say in a committee like this is that the United States acted to change the Iranian regime in 1953 by knocking off a democratically chosen prime minister at the behest of the British, whose oil interests were at stake. This is widely acknowledged and admitted. Anybody wants to research Operation Ajax, go take a look at it. Eisenhower project that knocked off the Iranian civilian democratically elected government. After that happened, the U.S. helped install a dictator, the Shah of Iran. We trained the secret police of Iran, and that dictator brutally ruled Iran for about 25 years. And Iran, which had been very pro-American because America fought for Iranian sovereignty at the end of the World War II when the Soviet Union wanted to gobble it up, that 25 years of the U.S. propping up a dictator over Iranians led to deep anti-American hostility. When the Shah was thrown out of office, the U.S. gave the Shah refuge. The Iranians asked for him back to try him. We refused. The Iranians took over the embassy and held American hostage, a violation of international law. In subsequent years, the United States military shot down an Iranian passenger. The USS Vincennes shot down a passenger jet in the 1980s, killed 290 Iranian civilians. That was on us, not on them. The U.S. gave weapons to Iraq when Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, a huge war in the region that cost 300,000 Iranian lives. And the U.S. provided weapons for Iraq to help them kill Iranians. We invaded a next-door neighbor to the east, Afghanistan, to topple a regime. We invaded a next-door neighbor to the west, Iraq, to topple a regime. We took a diplomatic deal with Iran, the first in 70 years that was actually working according to the IAEA and President Trump's first national security cabinet, and we tore it up. If we're going to try to find a diplomatic resolution, we not only have to acknowledge the Iranian terror that you truthfully recognize, but we also have to recognize that in a diplomatic solution, they have some points of concern as well. And if we don't deal with all of them, we won't find the diplomatic resolution that we would want rather than war. Thank you.
Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here today. I especially want to thank your spouses and your family members for being here as well. We know it takes a whole group of folks to help you succeed in what you do, and we're very grateful for their service as well. I'd like to start with you, Admiral Cooper. Of course, Operation Midnight Hammer is on everyone's minds, and I want to thank the incredible pilots, warriors, support teams for all that they did to make it a very successful mission. I am extremely proud of Team America. So I'll start with you. Senator King had mentioned ISIS, and I want to go a little bit further on that because we still see them as a big threat to those Americans and others that serve and live in the Middle East. Just last week, we saw ISIS extremists bomb a church in Damascus. So we know that they're still operating. It's a clear indication that that threat requires continued vigilance. So given the current volatility across the region, just in your estimation, looking at the resurgence of ISIS, other terrorist organizations, what indicators are you watching most closely when it comes to those terrorist groups?
Senator, first, thank you for your time yesterday, and thank you for the question. Defending the homeland broadly and defending it forward is of critical importance to us. Specifically, that translates into keeping our thumb on ISIS, which predominantly today exists in three places. ISIS in Syria, to a lesser degree ISIS in Iraq, and then ISIS-K, also known as ISIS Khorasan, on the Afghan-Pakistan border. We are focused on this problem set every single day. I only have to go back a few months to the events in New Orleans and our own country at the beginning of the year, the events as you described in the church bombing, to show that ISIS remains a threat. And as we look to the future, and if confirmed, I will remain nose down on this threat. It is an absolute priority.
And no doubt we would love to see all of our American troops be able to withdraw from other places around the globe, but we know that that is not realistic, and our American military men and women provide great stability, whether it's in Syria, Iraq, other places. We have 1,800 Iowa Army National Guardsmen that were just mobilized to go into Iraq and Syria. They will have boots on the ground very soon to continue with those stability operations. As we look at other ways that we might be able to bring troops home, again, maybe not realistic at this time. If you could walk us through our partners in the region, and would they be able to fully absorb those missions and provide for the stability without American presence?
Senator, U.S. presence is indispensable in the execution of the counter-ISIS mission today. We have led it. We lead it today, and I anticipate we'll lead it into the future. Every decision made on force posture is going to be conditions-based as I look to the future, and if confirmed, I will absolutely adhere to that. We are fortunate to have in the Defeat ISIS coalition more than 20 countries contributing, but America is leading it.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, and I agree with that sentiment, and it's extremely important to have American military leadership. I also believe in diplomacy, but there are times when we need our boots on the ground to provide that leadership for other nations. They look to us for that leadership, very, very important. And in the time that I have remaining, General Grynkewich, I'm sorry, we're all stumbling all over your name. I apologize. We've got quite a number of troops that serve in Europe today in EUCOM, and about 100,000 in Europe, 20,000 deployed to Eastern Europe. Again, for you, we haven't announced any formal drawdowns of military men and women in Europe, but how do you assess our current force posture in Europe, and what adjustments may be necessary to sustain deterrence and reassure our NATO allies?
Yes, Senator, in my current role on the Joint Staff, I'm very acutely aware of the global demand on our forces for both the AOR that Brad works in today in Europe and in the Indo-Pacific. And so as I look at what that European force posture needs to be, clearly there's been some benefit for the plus-up of forces that we have had, but clearly the force is also stressed, and there may be needs to make adjustments. I'll need to perform a full assessment on that, but as part of that assessment, I'll certainly look at creative ways that we can bolster our partners on the continent. And your National Guard and their work that they're doing in Kosovo and the State Partnership Program is certainly a key element that would be considered as part of that.
I appreciate it. We love our American military leadership. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to both of you on your nominations. So it seems like Donald Trump is once again playing red light, green light, this time war with Iran. 3 nights ago, he bombed 3 sites and warned of, quote, many targets left to strike and threatened, quote, tragedy if Iran did not immediately capitulate. Last night, he declared the war is over, but now the ceasefire seems to be changing every few hours, and no one seems to know if it will hold. Now, no one wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but experts in intelligence have told us time and time again, Iran's nuclear program cannot be bombed out of existence. So the question is, what is President Trump's plan? Another endless war in the Middle East? Vice Admiral Cooper, you are currently the Deputy Commander of U.S. Central Command. You are nominated to be commander, but you're already there. You don't decide policy, obviously. You carry out the president's orders. So today, I just want to ask you if you have any clarity from President Trump, the commander-in-chief who chose this war, on what comes next. So, Vice Admiral Cooper, has President Trump communicated to you whether or not he could contemplate American troops fighting in Iran?
Senator, as we sit here today, and as has been well described, a very dynamic time,
Yes.
literally right now as we're sitting here, the military's #1 priority is the safety and security of our men and women in the Middle East. That remains our priority. As I look to the future with the prospect of confirmation, my obligation, and in fact my duty, would be to provide the Secretary of Defense and the President a range of options to deal with policies that he would lead. And that's exactly where I would be committed.
Are you working on plans to deploy troops if the president orders it?
Senator, as you well know, we are working on plans every single day. I think this forum isn't the appropriate forum to talk about specific plans on force posture or what we're doing today. Certainly could capture that in a classified environment that I understand is
So I'm just trying to get whether or not there are plans. I'm not asking for what the plans are in particular. But I take it from what you're saying, the president has not ruled out American boots on the ground in Iran?
Senator, I think from a military perspective, it's critically important today that we provide the maximum latitude and decision space to the Secretary of Defense and the President to decide on key plans and directions, and we'll be standing by to execute those, as is our duty to do.
So on Saturday, President Trump and his administration claimed that the goal was to end Iran's nuclear program, not regime change, and declared complete victory with no evidence to support that. And then on Sunday, the president reversed course, posting, quote, that if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be regime change? And yesterday he congratulated everyone on a ceasefire and said, quote, God bless Iran. Vice Admiral Cooper, has President Trump communicated to you how long he intends this war could go on if the ceasefire breaks?
Senator, our role from a military perspective is to remain ready for a wide range of contingencies and protect our people, and that's exactly what we're doing today.
So that means you're preparing for a protracted war, is that right?
I think it would be inappropriate to comment on any specific action, but we're prepared for a wide range of contingencies, which is what would be expected.
Well, I'm just asking about your preparation, sir. I'm not asking what actions you will take. Our service members who volunteer to give so much have a right to know that the President of the United States values their lives and sends them into harm's way only when we clearly have a plan to understand how this protects the United States of America. I'm very concerned about the President's on-again, off-again explanations of why this bombing has taken place and that he's doing it with no constitutional authority. Only Congress can declare war, and the Senate must vote immediately to prevent another endless war. So I want to raise one more question. and that is reports that the Trump administration now wants to dismantle reforms developed under the first Trump administration to prevent civilian harm. Killing civilians is not only wrong, it threatens national security. General Stanley McChrystal called it insurgent math, meaning that for every civilian you kill, you create 10 new enemies. Vice Admiral Cooper, why is it important to U.S. national security to prevent civilian harm?
Well, Senator, first, thank you for your advocacy and passion on this issue. I share your same passion. I think it's a national security issue. It risks degrading our credibility and trust and puts troops at risk. And if confirmed, I'll continue to do what I do today, which is take an organization that has moved, I believe, from compliance to having civilian harm risk mitigation as part of our culture. It's important.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you,
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Warren. Senator Scott.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. Well, first off, congratulations to both of you. Congratulations to your family. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the sacrifice of your families. So I was at the White House yesterday, and as you expect, President Trump was elated of the success of the bombings in Iran and was very hopeful that there's a ceasefire that's going to hold. I think we all would love to make sure Iran does not have nuclear weapons. So I'm very appreciative that the president was willing to make the decision to do it. Not many people would have made that decision, and it looks like we're going to get a positive outcome. So for both of you, is the world a safer place with President Trump in office and Iranian nuclear facilities taken out? Here you want to start.
Senator, no country in the world wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. It's a safer place the farther back that is put.
The world is safer with Iran not having a nuclear weapon, Senator.
How do you think it changes the dynamics for some people that want to, that have decided to be our enemies, like Russia and Communist China and North Korea? How do you think it changes their thought process, knowing that the United States that we have a president that's willing to defend the freedom of the world, and especially our freedom?
Senator, I'll echo some of the comments the ranking member and chair made earlier on the incredible performance of the joint force, projecting American combat power from the continental United States halfway around the globe. I think that sends a message to everyone about the ability of America to reach out and touch any target anytime we want to.
Senator, my assessment would be that China and Russia are looking at this from a deterrence angle. We all know deterrence has 4 components: capability, capacity, will, and messaging. This was a strong demonstration of will, and I would anticipate that other countries are watching.
Thank you. For each of you, when you take over your roles, what will be your thought process to make sure we have the right assets, the right people, the right strategy in the areas that you're going to be responsible for?
Chairman, I have had the benefit of a global view of problems from my current position on the Joint Staff. And as I dive into issues on the European continent, the types of things that I'll be focused on will include the readiness of our warfighters, and that includes both U.S. warfighters and, if I'm lucky enough to be confirmed, the warfighters across the 32 nations of the alliance. I also think that it will be very important to look at the pivots in the character of war that are occurring right now in terms of unmanned and digital technologies, both from things like unmanned surface vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles, but also the underlying application of artificial intelligence and the connective tissue that allows us to effectively command and control. So those will be some of my key focus areas.
Senator, I would leverage the 4 years of experience I've had, including 3 years living about 100 miles from Iran, and orient my priorities generally in 3 areas. Defending the homeland, that translates to keeping our thumb on terrorists in the Middle East. I would look at deterring Iran and its proxies. I think that is a critical element of our national security. And also, I would look at countering China. I also agree that with my friend Grynkewich here, that the character of warfare is changing, and I think everything that we can do tactically to get warfighting tools into the hands of warfighters faster, something that should be pursued with a sense of urgency.
Thank you. Admiral Cooper, what's the importance of the Abraham Accord and our relationships with our military relationships with our partnerships with the Arab countries that are supportive of Israel?
So when the Abraham Accords were signed in the fall of 2020, and then we saw CENTCOM shift from a European orientation into Israel shift from a European orientation to CENTCOM. I think the confluence of those two events and an alignment and agreement that Iran is the principal threat presents extraordinary opportunities to advance security and enhance deterrence through the Abraham Accords countries.
All right. Well, thanks for your service. Congratulations on your nomination. I know you guys are both going to do a great job.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Congratulations to you both on your nominations. I want to take a moment to discuss ISR, the requirements in EUCOM and CENTCOM, two theaters that I think routinely make some heavy use of ISR. Could each of you please just briefly describe the ISR requirements in your respective theaters and how important ISR is for you to execute your strategy?
Senator, thank you very much for that. I think of this in two buckets. The ISR necessary to keep our eyes on and defend our homeland against terrorists throughout the region. And I also think it's important to have the ISR to keep our eyes on and deter Iran. Those are the two principal areas that we're focused on today.
In general?
Yeah, Senator, in the European theater, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance is absolutely essential. It's essential to keeping track of Russian activity, both in the maritime and the air domain. It's essential to protect the avenues that might threaten our homeland, and essential to monitor the eastern flank of the alliance.
You know, one trend, I think it's fair to say, is this reliance on space-based platforms instead of aircraft. I think my view is we probably continue to need both. In CENTCOM, Admiral, you have a challenge here, possibly ahead of you, with regards to the Straits of Hormuz and the possibility that the Iranians could use sea mines on the straits deployed by ships. I don't think they can deploy them by aircraft. I might be wrong about that. Could you talk about how the ISR requirement, if you have to deal with a continuing aggressive Iran, but with regards to closing down the straits and what that could mean to operations for the Fifth Fleet and for CENTCOM?
Senator, in my own experience from having commanded the Fifth Fleet for nearly 3 years, and as well as the associated Mine Task Force, which is coalition in nature, I think we have sufficient capacity and capability to handle the threat. ISR is a critical enabler to getting to the left of any Iranian actions. It would certainly be important for us to watch what they're doing and attempt to both anticipate and then react faster in the threat. It's a significant threat, it's a known threat, and one that we're watching every single day.
And what would the reaction be if they start to deploy sea mines? Do you have the adequate number of minesweepers? Do you try to remove them? How do you protect shipping going through that 30-mile strait?
It is a complex problem for sure. Iran has thousands of sea mines. It's a fairly narrow area. We do have a sufficient and the largest mine force in the world presently in the Middle East.
Do you know how they would deploy them? Like specifically what ships of theirs would be used to deploy sea mines?
We do have a good understanding of what that looks like.
And do we track where the ships are located, and would we know if they start pulling out of port?
We track them closely, and yes, we would know.
All right, thank you. I've got another quick question about just close air support. We're in the process of divesting, and this is for you, General, primarily, divesting from the A-10 platform, our premier close air support airplane. Special Operations Forces will have an armed overwatch capability with the OA-1K. Possibility we could try to do this more with F-16s, F-35s. I just want to get your opinion, because there is also a trend here away from, what we think of, lower to the ground, slow movers, Apaches as an example. We're no longer going to upgrade AH-64Ds to Es. But if we wound up in a conflict in Europe, I think close air support is, something we're going to continue to need. Just want to get your thoughts on that and where we should go.
Yes, Senator, thanks for the question. I do agree, given the characteristics and geography of Europe, close air support would be essential to any battle that we found ourselves in if we unfortunately got to that point. And it'll be important to show that we have that capability as a deterrent to help us not get there. Two things I think about with respect to the future of close air support. One is if we're using traditional aircraft to execute this mission, I do need those aircraft to be survivable in a much more densely protected from an air defense perspective environment. And we see that in Ukraine, where neither side is able to get close air support into the battlefield in a traditional sense because of the air defense. And so they have resorted to now less traditional means of close air support using first-person viewer drones, one-way attack drones, et cetera. And I think we need to look at both of those aspects of the future battlefield.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How's that working, the use of alternative close air support?
Senator, my assessment is that some of those alternatives are proving to be extremely lethal on the battlefield in Ukraine, and the pace of innovation that we've seen really on both sides of the equation has shown that smaller drones precisely maneuvered with lethal payloads can have a devastating effect on enemy forces on the front line.
At less expense to the taxpayer?
Yes, sir, much less expensive.
Thank you very much. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Thanks for both of your service and moving your families around. Kind of like a coach, you don't stay very long in one spot. Admiral, it's good to see your family here. Auburn folks, good Alabama folks. Live in Montgomery, I think, right? Might be my neighbor here in a year and a half after I run for governor and win it, Alabama, so hopefully they vote for me. General, let me ask you this. What's your relationship with the NATO commanders in the bigger countries that we have?
Senator, I have worked with European partners around the world over the years in a variety of coalition environments, and I know many of the leaders across all of those countries. It's a solid relationship, sir.
How about Turkey?
Sir, I've had the privilege of visiting Turkey several times over the course of my career and have great respect for the military capabilities that they can bring to bear.
Largest military in NATO, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Let me ask this question. This Ukraine-Russia war has been going on for a long time. A lot of people killed. We've spent a lot of money. Can Ukraine win?
Senator, I think Ukraine can win. I think anytime your own homeland is threatened, you fight with a tenacity that's difficult for us to conceive of if we haven't found ourselves in that same situation.
Yeah, they have absolutely fought hard. You got to give it to them. Admiral, we hadn't talked about the Houthis. I think we bombed them for 30 straight days. Is that correct?
So we bombed them for 51 straight days in conjunction with Operation Rough Rider.
Yeah. Have we stopped?
So the president gave the military a very precise mission, which was to restore the freedom of navigation, and that mission was successfully executed. We have freedom of navigation today. We agreed at a ceasefire several weeks ago, now 40 days ago, that if the Houthis didn't shoot at us, we wouldn't shoot at them. They have not shot at us, we have not shot at them, and we have multiple examples of destroyers going back and forth through the Bab el-Mandeb.
Destroyers, but what about merchant ships?
There is merchant ships flowing through the Bab el-Mandeb today. If we walk back to the fall of 2023 when the Houthis started their kinetic actions, it took several months for the flow of commerce to leave the Red Sea. I would expect it's going to take several months for it to fully come back.
My understanding is the Houthis are one of the strongest groups that are backed by Iran. Is that correct?
So they've been supported with arms, people, training, ISR for the better part of 10 years. They're well supported.
Yeah. China support them too?
They do.
Yeah. So do you think this is going to be an on and off project with the Houthis over the years, or are we going to be able to stabilize it?
I think we're now 40 days into this. The ball's in the Houthis' court. We're prepared for a range of actions, but I think the policies associated with the ceasefire remain in place, and we'll just be prepared from a military perspective for a wide range of contingencies, as is our obligation to do so.
Do we actually know who the leadership is that controls the Houthis?
We do, sir.
Yeah. And General Carrillo has been over the past few months, obviously. Do we talk to them? They talk back to us? How does that work?
Communications with the Houthis is done through diplomatic channels. Houthis are a foreign terrorist organization. We don't have a communication via the military.
So the president, when he works and tries to calm the situation down, who does he talk to?
So he uses the envoy for the Middle East, Ambassador Steve Witkoff, who helped enable the most recent ceasefire.
Yeah. They must be some tough rascals. I mean, we bomb them for 51 days and they're still kicking, right?
They're extremely well supplied by the Iranians.
They're supplied, but what are they dug in?
They're, as we've seen throughout the region, groups are going underground. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. This is a serious issue that we will have to look at into the future.
Yeah. We do make a bomb in Huntsville called the Moab. They do a lot of damage. I think we've seen that in Afghanistan. We got a few left, so maybe in the future we can't get them to reconcile, and because we're going to have full passage in the Red Sea. You know, if we're going to get AI going, we're going to have to get supply chains going. We can't haphazardly wonder if they're going to sink one of our ships. But thank you. Good luck to both of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Hubbardville. I'm going to recognize Senator Blumenthal next, but let me ask this. General Grynkewich, the Houthis are not an ethnic group, are they?
Sir, they are a religious group more than anything, but also some tribal affiliations that underlie them.
They exist for a purpose. Is that they've constituted themselves for one purpose, have they not?
Sir, they view themselves as the enemies of America, Israel, and the Jewish people.
So if they are withholding for now, is it your judgment that they have reformed and that they will not rain war or terror on us or the region in the future?
Senator, I would argue from my time and my current role on the Joint Staff and previous time in Central Command that the Houthis are likely to be a persistent problem for that we'll be dealing with in the future a few times again.
Thank you very much. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your service to your families as well, and thank you for the conversation that you had with me last week. I join you in expressing my gratitude and admiration for the incredible work done by our servicemen and women in the latest strike against Iran, the use of our B-2s and the intelligence that we were able to glean that enabled the strike, even though we don't know fully the extent of its success, I think is deeply impressive. And so I want to join in thanking our own military. But let me ask you, Admiral Cooper, how would you assess the importance of the Israeli military and intelligence contribution to making it possible for us to engage in that military operation? Would it have been possible without the Israelis, in effect, disabling and, in some instances, destroying the capability of their proxies and Iran itself in its air defenses?
Senator, thank you for that. Without getting into the specifics, which I think are best addressed in a classified environment, I think it is fair to say, and as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs articulated this past weekend, that there were Israeli actions that we benefited from, but were not directly tied to, associated with this specific operation.
It may not have been a direct partnership, but certainly the contributions of the Israeli military were actually extraordinarily significant in whatever success we had. Would you agree?
I agree.
Let me ask you now to follow up on some of the questions that have been asked. You and I talked about the importance of drones and unmanned aerial systems. My view is that the nature of modern warfare is changing before our eyes in real time. The threat that we see now in the area where you're going to have responsibility, where you have had that responsibility, is asymmetric from many of those terrorist groups that attacked, for example, Tower 22 and killed a number of our servicemen there. Are we sufficiently protected in the area now against possible Iranian retaliation against the 40,000 men and women in uniform that we have in that area?
Senator, I do agree that the nature and the character of warfare is changing before our very eyes. And this is why I think the important work of this committee, whether it's the FORGE Act or anything associated with it, where you can accelerate the delivery of counter-UAS systems or other warfighting tools into the hands of the warfighters forward, those are all value-added and needed imminently. If I look back specifically toward the Tower 22 incident in the ensuing now 17 or 18 months, we've made considerable improvements across the board, layered defense, employing both kinetic capability and non-kinetic capability. We really are leaps and bounds ahead of where we were before. Having said that, I would never be satisfied that we have the maximum readiness. I'll never be satisfied that we have enough to protect our men and women in uniform. And if confirmed, I would focus on this every single day.
We've done a lot, but we have more work to do.
For sure.
The Ukrainians are producing 4.5 million drones this year. The report I've seen is that the United States is producing about 100,000. I'm not sure that those figures are exactly right. They're in the public realm. But clearly, in my view, the United States is not producing enough drones. We are not supporting the industries that produce those drones as much as we should. Would you agree we need to do more?
Yes, sir. In my own experience, having commanded the Navy's first unmanned and artificial intelligence task force, I'm very familiar with the capabilities that exist in America's elite tech sector. I believe that we need to leverage that tech sector to maximum capability and deliver capability in the very near term, because we could do more, to your point.
General, I'm delighted to hear that you think Ukraine can win. My view is Ukraine must win. It must win because if it fails, Putin will present a threat to our NATO allies. Do you agree?
Senator, I think however the war in Ukraine ends, Putin has developed a war economy and a war machine that is underpinned by that war economy that will create a force in being that just by its very presence will be something that from a military perspective we will have to carefully consider how to provide options to the alliance in the SACEUR role if I'm confirmed, and to the Secretary and the President in my EUCOM role if confirmed.
Thank you. I look forward to continuing these conversations with both of you and really welcome your being so forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Gentlemen, are the figures about drone production with regard to Ukraine versus the United States, are they accurate? Was that a pretty accurate assessment of the production rate?
Senator, I don't know if the exact numbers are accurate, but the order of magnitude and the scale that Senator Blumenthal was describing, I think, is representative of the problem we face.
And Admiral Cooper?
Yeah, same perspective, sir. Order of magnitude and scale is about the same. I agree.
It's hard to understand how we go forward without increasing our rate, and that's my opinion. Either of you care to comment on that?
So I think America's extraordinary tech sector has the capability and will to produce at scale. This is simply a matter of prioritization with the appropriate authorities.
Thank you very much. And now, Senator Budd.
Thank you, Chairman. It's good to see you both. I've enjoyed our conversations recently. And Admiral, you're always a wonderful host over in NAVCENT, so thank you for that, and hello from my wife to yours. Admiral Cooper, last May, I met with Prime Minister Barzani of the Iraqi Kurdistan Regional Government in my office here, and also visited the region last year. So I was concerned to hear about delays in the delivery of U.S.-provided defense equipment to the Kurdish Peshmerga forces. And as you know, the Peshmerga, they've played a very important role in preventing the resurgence of ISIS in Iraq. So are you tracking delays in the delivery of equipment through Baghdad?
Senator, first, thank you for your passion in support of the Peshmerga. Great teammates. I have been tracking these delays. They're friction points that I think we've been able to work through, and if confirmed, it would be a matter of priority for both me, the staff, and the tactical staff on the ground to eliminate those friction points, get the resources into the hands of the Peshmerga as soon as possible.
Any particular levers that you have at CENTCOM to make sure that those delays are ended and that they receive their defense equipment in a timely manner?
I think we have a very strong mill-to-mill relationship with the Iraqi security force and the Iraqi military. We lever that to help break down some of those barriers, and I'm optimistic we can work through those friction points.
Thank you, Admiral. The United States and Israel, they've worked together a number of years to address the challenges of locating, mapping, and destroying hardened, buried targets and tunnels and their networks. So I've led this in the Senate, securing funding last year for the program to do that. Can you describe the ongoing challenges and the relevance of countering subterranean threats in CENTCOM and whether continued funding in this area is needed?
So I think in the Central Command, and I think we would have to anticipate in the future globally, you're going to see threats begin to go underground, whether we're talking about Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iranians. Other adversaries are clearly watching and see where they can gain advantage. In my current capacity, I have visited on multiple occasions the subterranean commando unit in Israel that goes after this problem set. I think as we look to the future, and if confirmed, I think we need to focus on two areas: sensors and munitions. And if confirmed, I would advocate for both of those.
So you've said they've gone underground, and you mean that very literally, and this program is still very relevant.
Humans, robots, dogs, we've done it all.
Thank you, Admiral. General, good to see you. I enjoyed our visit yesterday. Technology is changing the character of warfare as demonstrated by the Ukrainians in the fight against Russians. So if confirmed in your new role as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, how will you prioritize? The question is really about prioritization. How will you prioritize investments in emerging technologies, and what areas do you think are most critical?
Yes, Senator, thank you. If confirmed, as I look across the alliance, there are certain countries who would have a very strong value proposition in terms of being able to bring unmanned technologies to bear, whether they're aerial technologies or maritime unmanned capabilities as well that have proven very effective in the Black Sea region, for example. I would definitely put a high priority on those. They're very cost effective. They're a way to build mass on the modern battlefield, and understanding that we'll face mass in terms of the Russian threat, I think developing that asymmetric option is going to be essential to European security in the future. Thank you.
Admiral, it's really disheartening for all of us to see the state of Afghanistan, especially after the Biden-Harris administration's disastrous withdrawal and the abandonment of so many Afghans to return to Taliban rule. So my concern in the region is the return of terrorist networks like ISIS-Khorasan to the country, but also to the broader region. So Admiral, if confirmed, what will you do and how will you work with regional partners to deny extremist groups safe haven in South Asia?
Senator, ISIS-Khorasan, also known as ISIS-K, operates principally on the Afghan-Pak border. The mechanism we use to address this issue today is through a mill-to-mill relationship with Pakistan, specifically focused on counterterrorism. We've seen the benefit of this relationship in the last couple of months with the handover of the Abbey Gate mastermind to U.S. authorities several months ago. And if confirmed, I would continue to invest in this mill-to-mill counterterrorism relationship with Pakistan. It's good for America, and it helps keep America safe.
Thank you, Admiral. I wish you both good luck.
Thank you, Senator Budd. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by associating myself with my colleague, Senator Kane's many strong statements on the need for congressional authorization for exactly the kind of military strike on Iran that the president illegally ordered on Saturday. I have been committed to Congress reasserting its responsibility under the War Powers Act since my first election, and I support Senator Kane's War Powers resolution. In fact, I ran for Congress because of this issue, so that when the drums of war start beating in Washington again, I would be in a position to make sure that our leaders fully consider the true costs of war, not just in dollars and cents, but in the sacrifices and blood of our troops. I've long said that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon, but this goal could and should have been pursued through diplomatic means. There was no imminent threat to the United States or our troops. It wasn't time to strike, not when the democratically elected representative of the American people have not had a chance to weigh the costs and risks against the gains, to make an informed decision on behalf of our constituents, and to make sure that the president is not getting us into yet another forever war in the Middle East. Service members will be the ones to risk their lives if we get drawn into another unnecessary war with no plan and no end state. Their commander-in-chief owes it to them and to all Americans to uphold the Constitution that they swore to uphold and defend. Vice Admiral Cooper, I know that you are here to be considered to be CENTCOM commander, but you have also been serving as the deputy commander with all the events this week, and absent a CENTCOM posture hearing, I have questions for you in that capacity because I deem it relevant to how you will perhaps carry out your role as CENTCOM commander should you be confirmed. To know your knowledge, what did CENTCOM recommend to the White House in terms of congressional declaration of war and consultation prior to the operation?
Senator, first, I'm mindful and highly respectful of the role that you, this committee, and the Congress play overall. I think the matter of directions given and orders given are related to policy and best addressed by the Office of the Secretary of Defense and the White House. Our role from a military perspective, as it has always been, and if confirmed, will be, I will adopt the same approach, would be to provide the widest range of options to our decision makers and remain as ready as possible to implement them when ordered.
Oh, that is true, but you didn't answer my question. My question was, to your knowledge, what did CENTCOM recommend to the White House in terms of congressional declaration of war and consultation prior to the operation? What was your recommendation? I didn't ask you what they ordered you to do. I asked you what was your recommendation.
Yeah, Senator, in my current capacity, I'm very familiar with all the operations associated with these last couple of weeks. I think those conversations are best conducted in a classified environment.
Okay, let's do that then. I look forward to hearing from you in a classified environment. What's the end game that is currently being sought, and how will you know at CENTCOM if that has been achieved?
Senator, we've maintained, first and foremost, a focus on protecting our men and women in uniform for their safety. That is our priority today. We maintain a readiness for a wide range of contingencies as expected, and our role, and my role specifically, if confirmed, would be to provide my best military advice to support the policies as they would be given to us in the future.
So you're saying you don't have an opinion on what the end game would be, or what the mission accomplished, what the benchmark would be, and you can't tell us that?
Our
We're just
role
going to
today,
bomb a foreign nation and not know what the end goal is or the op-ramp is?
of course, those end states and goals are all obviously always driven by policy, and the United States military will stand by to implement the policy direction as ordered.
Well, I was alarmed by the president's reckless statements on Sunday that suggested he might order our military to pursue regime change as the end game in Iran. Like many who served and sacrificed in Iraq, I am sick with anger and dread at the thought that in 2025, the President of the United States is talking of toppling another government in the Middle East, drawing Americans into a destabilizing military action in a volatile region, and owing the chaos that follows, perhaps for decades to come. Vice Admiral Cooper, will you commit that if confirmed as the commander of CENTCOM and tensions with Iran continue, you will provide recommendations to give Iran an off-ramp from further military action without seeking regime change in Iran as an option? Not necessarily the White House would decide what they will decide, but will you provide that as one of the options?
I would provide my best military advice based on the policy direction given to us, Senator.
Okay. With current uncertainty leading many American citizens in the region to fear being caught in the crosshairs, I am concerned about whether we're doing enough to support Americans who may want to evacuate. Admiral Cooper, can you speak to the ways that CENTCOM may help facilitate a safe and smooth evacuation of American citizens from a dangerous region if required?
Senator, CENTCOM is always postured to support the diplomatically ordered evacuations of a variety of forms. We've seen recently an authorized departure from Bahrain. We've seen authorized departure out of Israel. We've seen separate diplomatic departures from Baghdad. But in general, we're always postured to support diplomatic and policy-led direction for evacuations.
I think that will give Americans in the region comfort to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say, though, that I'm actually kind of taken aback. The hypocrisy and cognitive dissonance I've heard from the other side of the aisle in this hearing is stunning, even by Washington standards. Let's pick apart a couple of these arguments. First of all, President Trump avoided, much to the chagrin of many who wanted more entanglements in the Middle East, a very surgical and strategic strike that was in the core interests of the United States of America, period. The regime change that he was talking about was from the inside. If that's going to happen, that's going to happen. But the Democrat Party effectively at this point is the pro-war party. There's no diplomacy. It's just about pick your theater. That's where they want to go. The whole idea that Iran was even in this position is because Obama sent them truckloads, or I should say pallets of cash, and Joe Biden looked the other way. And then they were able to arm and fund the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah, a problem that then had to be dealt with by Israel. And so this sort of looking the other way now and using language like not being tied up in a forever war, listening to my Democratic colleagues, that's where we'd be right now in Europe and in Ukraine. They want the immediate admission of Ukraine into NATO and the United States to directly engage. Thank God we have a president that will engage in diplomacy and understand, by the way, the inconsistency that I hear from the other side of the aisle. On one hand, Ukraine's going to win. But on the other hand, Putin is on the verge of steamrolling through Europe. It's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. But the fact is, the Democrats are criticizing President Trump right now, who achieved something that if you would have been sitting here 2 years ago and looked at the map of the Middle East, would have been impossible to think of. He used the bunker-busting bombs, by the way, flown out of those B-2s from Missouri. They were in the air for 30 hours and refueled. Through subterfuge and exquisite execution, dropped those bunker busters on something the size of the desk that you're at, General. And they completed that mission. And the president acted under his core Article 2 powers. Spare me the next constitutional crisis. Every week, by the way, it's some ridiculously fake new constitutional crisis. Obama used that same authority to drop thousands of bombs. We didn't hear a word. The only thing that binds the Democrat Party right now is that they are anti-Trump. They stand for nothing, nothing else. An incoherent, wandering foreign policy, a domestic agenda that has been adopted by the radical left. That's it. And by the way, I also want to point out that through every conferee that's come through this committee and others, the question has been asked, will you abide by the law? We are literally now less than 12 hours after a district court judge approved by this Senate when the Democrats were in charge and a lame duck president who is now defying the Supreme Court, a district court judge who is now defying the Supreme Court, who said you have to deport these 7 criminals who raped grandmas and people with disabilities. So, let's have a bit of a reality check about what's going on in this country right now. Maybe we could actually celebrate a president who executed something in the core national interest of the United States and then got on the phone and got 2 parties together who've been at war for effectively generations. So it's just, there are certain moments that you feel like you're outside of your own body watching something that's so inconsistent just to score some sort of daily political point. Now, should we have a conversation about Article 1 powers versus Article 2 powers? Absolutely, but the president was clearly within his Article 2 powers to do this. So I do want to ask, with the limited time I suppose that I have left, General, NATO, the president is heading to the NATO summit. Our European allies for a very long time now, generations, have abused the generosity of the United States of America because we're subsidizing their social welfare programs in Europe. There's going to be a commitment to 5%. I guess I'd like to hear from each one of you how you'll use your role, that they'll actually do that. And I don't mean for pensions, I mean for munitions. And 5% of your GDP declarations, they don't win wars. Bullets do, missiles do. Their defense base is more atrophied than ours. But what role can you play in your conversations with leaders over there that they're actually going to live up to their commitments, and as opposed to sort of just making these proclamations and never really doing anything about it?
Senator, thanks for the question. If confirmed, I think that's one of my key roles, is to look at that increased investment that the alliance has agreed to or is on the cusp of agreeing to at the summit, and ensuring that it's put into real capability, hard military capability that will allow Europeans to take the lead for European defense and allow America to continue to participate in that defense, but also to meet our other global requirements.
And Senator, I think a little bit of a different dynamic and situation in the Middle East. Several of the countries have deep pockets. They're very committed to buy American weapons and sensors. I think our obligation is to make sure the FMS process can deliver those weapons in a reasonable time frame, and I would advocate for that if confirmed.
Thank you.
We've got a lot of F-15s we'd like to sell. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good point. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. Vice Admiral Cooper, the Straits of Hormuz handles approximately 21 million barrels of oil per day, accounting for nearly 1/5 of global petroleum consumption and making it, as you know, the most critical oil transit choke point in the world. It also sees the passage of about 3.5 trillion cubic feet of liquefied natural gas annually, impacting Asia as well as Europe's energy security. We know that a closure would not only disrupt $1.2 billion in oil exports daily, but it could also trigger double-digit percentage increases in global energy prices, prompt increased insurance surcharges on shipping, and require a significant military response to restore maritime security. So my question for you, sir, is are current force posture and naval assets in CENTCOM sufficient to deter or to counter a full blockade in the Straits?
Senator, thank you very much for that. I'm very familiar with the problem set from my 3 years commanding the 5th Fleet, which includes a pretty substantial mine force in the region. I've also personally transited the Strait probably 50 times in my career. It is a complex problem for sure, but it's a small, narrow waterway. The key to this is getting to the left of the problem, establishing a deterrent posture, which we have today, and then keeping our eyes on Iranian activity, which is exactly what the U.S. military is doing today. And if confirmed, I would continue to do that into the future.
So what's your assessment? How quickly could the U.S. and allied naval forces secure freedom of navigation if commercial shipping is indeed attacked in the Straits?
Senator, the specifics of this are highly classified, but historically in mine warfare, nothing happens quickly. I think we would think of this in terms of weeks and months, not days.
What additional risks does a potential closure pose to our service members and logistics operations in the Gulf region, in addition to the oil cutoff that I mentioned?
As one of the 3 strategic choke points in the Middle East, along with the Bab el-Mandeb and the Suez, there would be significant impact strategically.
Vice Admiral Cooper, even before the U.S. attacks on its nuclear facilities, it was reported that China has been indirectly supporting Houthi rebels by purchasing large quantities of Iranian oil. These purchases bolsters Iran's economy and enable the supply and funding of Houthis with weapons and resources. Additionally, Chinese companies have been implicated in providing dual-use technologies such as satellite imagery, missile and drone components to the Houthis, and in return, Chinese vessels have been allowed safe passage through the Red Sea. So my question for you is, in light of the recent escalation in tensions in the region, could you elaborate on how China's support of the Houthis serves the broader strategic goals that they have in the Middle East, as well as global trade routes?
Yes, Senator, I completely agree with your characterization of the Chinese involvement. And if confirmed, it would be a priority of mine to call out the things that the Chinese are doing and the things that they're not doing. Here's what they're doing as an example, in addition to those that you provided. They're providing sensors and components to the Iranians, who ship them to the Houthis, who organize them and arrange them to shoot at Americans. I think that's unacceptable. I think we have to talk about that. Here's what they're not doing. They've had a 10-year period of 3 ships in the Gulf of Aden. They're there for counter-piracy, but they haven't caught a single pirate. They've turned a complete blind eye to the years of flow of weapons into the Houthis that have ended up getting shot at Americans. I think that's unacceptable, and I think we have to call that out.
Very good. Vice Admiral Cooper, our committee received testimony earlier this year from the 494th Fighter Squadron leadership about the important role that the F-15 Eagle has been playing in the Middle East. During the April attack on Israel, The Air Force described the F-15E operations as, quote, the largest air-to-air enemy engagement in over 50 years. It's been reported that coalition forces in Israel destroyed nearly 99% of all inbound weapons and drones coming in from Iran. And as you know, the brand new F-15EX is an even more capable aircraft. The brand new aircraft is building on a larger payload, range, and speed, in addition to next generation capabilities to increase lethality. So my question for you in the remaining time here, sir, is can you talk about the importance of the F-15 as well as these future F-15EXs that are coming online? What that means for CENTCOM operations, and how do you envision utilizing them in the future, and how great is your need for them?
Senator, the F-15 is deployed to the Central Command region today. They're doing indispensable work, and my expectation is the next version of the F-15 would just up the ante and up the game and enhance this capability. I'm looking forward to the future.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Sheehy.
Thank you, Chairman. So COCOM commanders don't really own equipment. They rent it from the services. What's your concern right now, I'll start with you, Admiral, regarding our magazine depth to be able to support sustained operations in CENTCOM?
Senator, I'm concerned about everything, but one of the concerns would be munitions and magazine depth, as you've described. On one hand, I think we've taken a very strong and positive role in judicious use. As an example, over the last year, we've gone from firing $2 million missiles at $100,000 drones to just recently firing $25,000 Vietnam-era modified rockets against these 100,000 drones. So I think we're moving in the right direction in that regard. I know that senior Department of Defense officials are focused on this matter. I think we need to move with a sense of urgency on it.
And how do we close that feedback loop between the warfighters, who ultimately are represented by you? You're controlling the warfighters in their AOR. How do we close the acquisition feedback loop to ensure that as you are fighting ships in the Red Sea, as you're dropping bombs on Iran or elsewhere, those magazine depth needs and munitions requirements, those demand signals are being real-time relayed back to the industrial base and to the acquisition command so that there's not a 1 to 5 year lag between you getting what you need. It happens much faster. What can we do institutionally to improve that process?
Senator, I think there are a number of measures. One of them is the chairman's own proposal on the Forge Act or related proposals that simply cut the red tape and provide the leverage for us to take America's tech sector, who produces exquisite sensors and weapons, and cut the timelines to get it from the tech sector into the hands of warfighters. Anything associated with that policy or statute-wise would be helpful.
Well, I think one of the keys is to involve the combatant commanders in that process, because ultimately you're the ones being asked to fight these systems. And we've always divorced the design, the acquisition, the program management, and the fighting of the systems into many different silos. And in that siloing, we lose oftentimes the grounding of what makes those systems excellent, which is grounding it with the warfighter. So you know, as you are on the precipice of taking over our most active combatant command, it's been so for 25 years. General Carrillo was my boss when I fought the war. He was a great man, great American leader. I'd encourage you to try to make that vocal change. I know that as a uniformed officer, you have to salute and move out, but at the same time, you can be an agent for change and help us as we try to fix this process, because it's going to take uniformed leaders and elected leaders working together to make sure that we finally bridge this gap, because it's been a really annoying problem that's been building for decades. So I would encourage you to try to make that change in uniform, ensure that your COCOM demand signals make it back into the acquisition pipeline quickly so that they're reacted to. What percentage right now of U.S. naval assets does CENTCOM have at its disposal for the current conflicts?
Yes, sir. Less than 10% as a general rule sitting in the theater today, depending on what specialty that we're talking about. Obviously, a little bit different from an aircraft carrier perspective, right, as is known to carriers in the region.
But we're concluding, basically a year and a half, that the longest period of sustained naval combat we've seen since Leyte Gulf. And relatively, your allocation of naval resources, I would argue, is probably not where it should be. But that's for me to say, not to you to say. General, over to you. So Europe, obviously, it's been a while since we've had a major security crisis in Europe, of course, until Ukraine. That broke, 70 years of relative tranquility there. How do you evaluate the ability of our partners to defend themselves going forward? Largely, the European defense infrastructure has really been a tent with America as the sole tent pole, depending on us. We know the UK is very much a shell of what it used to be. How do you evaluate the ability of our partners in the next 5 years to scale up and be ready to defend themselves?
Senator, I think the ongoing NATO summit and the likely outcome of a commitment to increase defense spending is going to result in real capability. And if confirmed, I'll have a key role in ensuring that it is real capability and that it's the right capability to meet capability targets that the alliance has agreed upon. I also think that you talked a little bit about the industrial base here on the United States side of the Atlantic. I think the European industrial base also requires investment, and that's why, as part of that 5%, some of that money going into infrastructure, I think, is going to be absolutely essential to allow sustained investment in the industrial base that incentivizes companies to keep production lines open so they can meet that demand signal when combatant commands make it in time of crisis, as you eloquently described.
Great. Thanks for your answers.
Thank you very much, Senator Sheehy. Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, for, of course, holding this hearing. I want to thank the nominees for your service, your willingness to continue to serve, and congratulations on your nominations. I see your families here. I can tell by the smiles how proud they are of you, and we're thankful that you serve along with them as well. Admiral Cooper, of course, it's wonderful to see you again. I very much, as you know, enjoyed visiting NAVCENT in 2023 in Bahrain, and we learned so much about the Fifth Fleet, and I know about your work to promote stability in the Middle East. And I want to take just a moment to thank our brave service members who conducted these strikes on Iran this past weekend. And we know, and you know, everybody watching, that we have to do everything in our power to ensure the safety of all of our troops, all of our personnel deployed throughout the region. So appreciate their service and all of your sacrifice. So about the long-term strategy to deter Iran. So as we wait to assess the impact of this weekend's strikes on Iran's nuclear program, we can't forget Iran's continued support for terrorism throughout the region. Thankfully, Iran's on its back legs. The fall of Assad's brutal dictatorship in Syria is already having profound implications for Iran, which supported Assad's regime since 2011. Coupled with Hamas's defeat in Gaza and the decapitation of Hezbollah's leadership in Lebanon, Assad's collapse has left Tehran weaker and more isolated than it's been in decades. However, across the region, Iran continues to work against American interests and poses one of the greatest and persistent threats to U.S. and coalition forces. Over the years, sadly, hundreds of Americans have been killed by Iranian-aligned militias, including 3 soldiers killed last year in Jordan. But our response after the fact has been a strategy that is more reactive than proactive. So, Admiral, can you discuss the specific threats Iranian-backed militias pose to the U.S. coalition forces, and what will you advocate that we do, if confirmed, to proactively counter or target them? And does CENTCOM have the necessary authorities to target these militias, other than the ability to act in self-defense? It's so critical.
Senator, first, great to see you again, and fond memories from the trip to Bahrain several years ago. I think you well described what others have described as a seismic shift in the region, a tectonic shift strategically with respect to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Assad regime's collapse, activities with the Houthis. If we reflect on about the last 20 months, I think it's important to remember the Iranian-aligned militia group and the Houthis have attacked Americans about 500 times. I don't think that's particularly well understood, but that's about the number. And so in this ensuing period, we have implemented dozens of specific measures to enhance the security of our men and women at sea and on bases throughout the region. It is our #1 priority today, and if confirmed, it would continue to be my #1 priority, protecting our men and women.
And can you advise how we work to stop that flow of Iranian weapons to the proxies throughout the Middle East to stop these?
We work with partners each and every day, a variety of partners, whether it's in Syria with the SDF, with our Iraqi friends, with friends at sea, because the flow goes in the air, on the sea, and on land.
Thank you. I want to move over to you now, General, and talk about China's lessons from Ukraine, because China has been identified as a pacing challenge for the Department of Defense across both the Trump and the Biden administrations. As former CIA Director Burns said, and I'm going to quote here, "No one is watching U.S. support for Ukraine more closely than Chinese leaders." And that abandoning Ukraine would be, and I'm going to quote again, "one of the surest ways to rekindle Chinese perceptions of American fecklessness and stoke Chinese aggressiveness." So, General, what message does it send to China if the U.S. ceases to support Ukraine? And what lessons is Chairman Xi likely to take from the conflict if the Russians are able to achieve their objectives?
Senator, the president's been very clear on his objectives in Ukraine are to achieve an end to the war and a ceasefire. And if confirmed, my responsibility will to provide him a wide range of options in order to achieve that objective. I think in terms of the lessons from Ukraine, from a purely military perspective, I would tell you there's a ton of them. We're at a pivot in the character of war, the use of drone technology, whether it's one-way attack drones that Iran has supplied to the Russians that have been used against Ukrainian cities, whether it's North Korean support and ballistic missiles and troops. All of those lessons are absolutely pertinent to a conflict on Taiwan, and I think we are learning just as much as the Chinese are from our current partnership with Ukraine.
Well, I'm going to take this question for off the record because my time is up, but I'm just going to let you hear it here. How do you think a rapid end to the war in Ukraine in Russia's favor will affect the United States standing around the world? And I'm glad to take that off the record, unless the chairman rules otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Sheehy, do you wish to engage in a second round of questioning? I want to thank our witnesses and thank members of the committee. For the information of members, questions for the record will be due to the committee by 6 p.m. today. And with that, and with the thanks of the committee to our witnesses, we are adjourned.